What's going on, y'all? It's JD Piquel. Today on the Hard Count, we're going to give you our updated college football playoff rankings after week 4 of the college football season. Welcome into the Hard Count, the people's show for every single thing that you know and that you love about college football. It happens here on a daily basis. Nick Brake does the heavy lifting. You can help drive the show by subscribing to the channel. We are also available on podcasts wherever you get them. We're available on Apple and Spotify. We just did our week 4 reaction. We kind of recapped everything that went on this past Saturday. Would encourage you to check that out. Leave us a 5-star review there as well. So like I just mentioned, week 4 is just now in the rearview mirror. We're getting further and further away from it. We're going to give you how we see the college football playoff race shaping up as of right now. Our first 2 out and then our top 4. I want to make sure I give this preface. A lot of these teams are going to play each other. So if we have Ohio State and Michigan both on here, that doesn't mean that we think Ohio State and Michigan are both making the playoff. Could that happen? Absolutely. Are we calling our shot with this list? No. This is an updated rankings. Without further ado, we'll start at 6 and work our way up. Our 6th best team in the country, so our second of our first 2 out, is USC. USC was able to beat an Oregon State team on the road. They played them tough. Oregon State did. Oregon State really pushed USC, and one of the first times that we saw this USC offense sputter just a little bit. Now, I'm actually more encouraged that they were able to win, scoring less than 30 points, scoring less than 20 points even. I'm encouraged because that shows me USC didn't have their A game or even their fastball, really what they like to do on offense, and still found a way to win. My concern with USC is on the defensive side of the ball. They have shown they've done a really good job creating turnovers. You're saying they create turnovers. That's great. Why would you ever be concerned about that? Well, I'm not concerned that they're getting turnovers. I'm concerned what happens when they don't get turnovers. Because the beautiful thing about football is when you create a turnover, that's the result of you being opportunistic and in a lot of ways executing right place, right time, all that. But you don't necessarily want to bank on turnovers. You don't want to go into a game and saying, all right, we're going to get a fumble and interception, and that's how we're going to win this game. Do you strive to get them every single week? Of course. Can you count on them week to week? I don't think that's a reliable formula. We talk about this with USC every single time until we get our answer on this. When they go play Utah at Utah, October 15th, how do they stack up with a team that has the tough identity of Utah? They're going to run the football. They're going to take time off the clock. They're going to play it tough in the trenches. Can USC withstand that kind of an effort? Remains to be seen. For us right now, they're number 6 in the country. At number 5, we got Clemson. Clemson survived a scare from Wake Forest in double overtime. Credit to them. They found a way to get it done with the offense carrying the load. DJ Uiagalelei just had a moment where he came out and said, listen, I'm him. In this game, at least, he was him. Had an enormous day through the air. The length of the wide receiving core came to play. The concern I have now for Clemson going forward, that front seven's really good. The secondary got beat routinely. To quote, remember the Titans, just getting beat like they stole something is all. That's how it went down at Wake Forest. And Sam Hartman and that wide receiver core at Wake Forest, they're really good. I promise you, Clemson is going to play they're going to play a lot more dynamic and difficult to match up with kind of quarterback and wide receiver combos. Will they be the same caliber as Wake Forest? They're going to at least be on par, starting with NC State coming to town this week. So the secondary gives me some cause for concern. I know they're banged up. I know they're young, but they got to straighten that out if they want to eventually get back to the college football playoff. Nonetheless, they're good for number 5 for us on this week's rankings of the college football playoff. Moving into our top 4, at number 4, we got Michigan. Michigan played for the first time a Power 5 opponent, played relatively formidable competition in Maryland. Now they played at the Big House, but Maryland gave Michigan a fight. I was impressed to see Michigan actually be in a football game where it was competitive and it was back and forth a little bit for the majority of that first half. Now, the score is a little bit closer than I think the game ultimately was over the duration of those 4 quarters. Like I said, kind of close in the first half. Michigan kind of had their way for most of the second half, came down to an onside kick, so it wasn't like the game was just totally out of reach for Maryland, but Michigan sort of asserted their dominance for the most part in the second half of that game. Blake Corum had a big day on the ground. They're going to need that to be the case for them going forward. J.J. McCarthy, just strictly being in the football game, allowed for a lot of those running lanes that Blake Corum had. Offensive line did their thing. Don't get it twisted. They controlled the line of scrimmage, but J.J. McCarthy's threat to run the football adds a lot of opportunities for this backfield. And you saw that. On top of that, J.J. McCarthy made a lot of plays, evading pressure and getting the ball downfield. It wasn't like he was necessarily having to light it up on the ground. Blake Corum was doing that. But the extra plays that he made, getting them out of 2nd and 7 and into a 1st and 10 because he evades that defensive lineman and gets the ball out to one of their playmakers. That's the element he brings to this offense. They're going to have a chance in this thing, all right? They're going to have a chance to get into this playoff. For us right now, they're at number 4, so if the whole thing started today, they would be in the playoff for us. At number 3, we got Alabama. They handled Vanderbilt 55-3, did what they're supposed to do. I am fascinated to see what they do this week when they go to Arkansas. An Arkansas team that's coming off a loss, so they're a little bit dangerous, trying to get back right are the Razorbacks. I'm very interested to see how does Alabama play a team that's so tough within the trenches, because we know what Arkansas is bringing to the party. They're bringing KJ Jefferson downhill at you. They're bringing that whole offensive line full speed right into your grill. Like, they're going to test Alabama physically. At the very least, they're going to try to from a game plan perspective. So we have them at 3 right now. Do not get it twisted. Alabama is going to have every opportunity to prove themselves. A lot of us would assume, which is a dangerous thing to do in this sport, but a lot of us assume they're going to get a chance to play Georgia in the SEC title game in Atlanta. But as for this week, we have them at number 3. Number 2, we got Ohio State, took care of business over Wisconsin. Wisconsin actually ran the football a little bit better than you're probably comfortable with if you're a Buckeye fan. Nonetheless, scored over 50 points. C.J. Stroud is just dealing when it comes to what he's doing back there, pulling the trigger for Ohio State. Marvin Harrison Jr. is out here wearing an Apple Watch and Louis Vuitton cleats. You love to see it. So they're continuing to just sort of do what they're supposed to do at this point. They're going to get tested, but all signs are pointing to that game at the end of the year where they play Michigan. That game will mean a whole lot, we anticipate. They're number 2 for us this week. At number 1, we'll probably get some pushback. That's okay. We welcome it. The Georgia Bulldogs, for us, are still the best team in the country. Now, they struggles even feels like the wrong word to use. Kent State played better than a lot of us anticipate them having the opportunity to play against Georgia. Final score was 39-22. Kent State scored 22 points. It's more than Oregon could say. More than South Carolina could say. Kent State kind of pressed the issue a little bit against Georgia. Stetson Bennett threw a pick, no touchdowns. So you would have liked to see Georgia be more dominant in this game. I don't fault you if that's the issue you have with the Bulldogs from this past week. Here's what I will say, though. We can't discredit what Georgia has done to this point in this season. From a resume standpoint, I would encourage you to look back at what they did against Oregon. The violence that took place in Atlanta in that game. I would encourage you to look at the South Carolina game. The abuse that occurred in that game from this Georgia Bulldog football team. Did they look as dominant against Kent State? No. Unless they had lost this game, you weren't going to hear too much concern on our side. What I think is happening, though, and the reason why this game was as close as it was, is because you have 8 starters on the defensive side for Georgia who are all really talented, all phenomenal players, but they're still, in my opinion at least, learning how to be starters. Now, that's not to say that this Georgia defense played poorly, allowed less than 100 yards rushing, flying all over the field. They played, really, for the most part, pretty well. Allowed 22 points to Kent State. You don't love to see that. You have 8 starters learning how to be starters. A year ago, in a situation like this, those 8, what are now starters, were previously backups. They'll rotate in. They'll get some time. But to now have to bring it as a starter in a game like this, I just think that's a little bit of a different adjustment from a mentality standpoint. Georgia's going to be fine. Again, I have them at number 1 just from the sheer fact that we've seen what they have under the hood. We're not going to knock them back for winning a game against Kent State. All right? So to recap, we got the Georgia Bulldogs at 1, Ohio State at 2, Bama at 3, Michigan at 4. Our first 2 out are Clemson at 5 and USC at 6. But the beautiful thing about college football, this is all going to come out in the wash over the duration of the regular season. So that's it for us here on The Hard Count. We appreciate you tuning in. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram to stay with everything that we're doing here. You don't want to miss a minute of it. We're going to keep the party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.